Hey students, this is Miss Went, and this is a really fast overview of the nitrogen cycle. So if you were absent and missed me doing it live in class, that's what this is for. And I'm recording this on 2222, which I thought was kind of cool, so we got that up there too. All right, so when I give these notes in class, we start with a diagram that looks like this. And I have paper copies in my room. It's in Schoology with this video as well. And it's got some blank things on here, and we fill it out together in class. So I'm going to show the answer key and kind of talk through it a little bit. So if you have this paper, you should fill in some answers. And we're going to start here. Let me make this a little bigger. Okay, so there's kind of the top of our diagram. And the top circle here is N2. This is nitrogen gas. And so what it is, it's two atoms of nitrogen and they're bonded together. This is a really bad picture. So the little 2 there means there's 2 atoms that are stuck together. And nitrogen gas, it doesn't do much. It's kind of a filler. It's not reactive. It doesn't do chemical reactions really well and stuff. So we breathe it in and we just breathe it right back out. 78% of the atmosphere that we breathe in is nitrogen. So 75% of all the air out there. All right. So that's where we're going to start because that's where most of the nitrogen is. Now we breathe this in and out, but your body can't use it. We need to change it to a different form in order for your body to use it. And there's a couple of ways to do that. So if you follow the arrows here, one way that we can change nitrogen gas into another form is by using lightning. Lightning has a high amount of energy. It'll take those 2 atoms and break them apart, and then they can combine with other atoms like oxygen or hydrogen in order to make new chemicals. Okay, and that's called atmosphere fixation. Okay, because we're changing it still up in the air. So that does a little bit, but actually what does most of our nitrogen fixation for us is bacteria. So this little circle right here kind of shows a little close-up of the bacteria that are in the soil. And you can see some plant roots with that as well. There's going to be worms and bugs down there. But these bacteria, sorry about that, they're called nitrogen-fixing bacteria. And they take the nitrogen gas from the air and they change it to a new chemical. We got that right here, NH3. Okay, so it breaks the nitrogen atoms apart, puts hydrogens on them. Okay, so that's kind of the first step. And then they go to another kind of bacteria here and they'll get changed again. They'll get oxygen added. So maybe 2 oxygens to make NO2 or maybe 3 oxygens to make NO3. Okay, so we're just using the nitrogen in different chemical reactions. Now, when it is NO3, that's called nitrates. Okay, so we have all along the side here, we kind of have all the symbols for the different chemicals. And you don't need to memorize the chemical names with the names. That's not something we need to do. But these nitrates here, this is what plants need as fertilizer. Okay, so the bacteria took nitrogen from the air and we changed it a couple times during chemical reactions, and the bacteria did all that work. Now we have this nitrate, and you can see the arrows. The nitrate goes to the plants like this grass or the grass here, and the grass can use that to grow. And then it gets part of the food chain. So the grass is eaten by the deer, maybe the deer is eaten by a human, and that's how nitrogen goes through the food chain as one of our nutrients that we need to build body parts, make more cells, and to grow. Okay, so the bacteria in the soil are really important to change the nitrogen for us. Okay, now in this picture we have this little steaming pile of deer poop there. So one way that the nitrogen gets cycled is the waste products from animals. So when you go to the bathroom, the nitrogen you ate as food, some of that's going to come out as a waste product because you're going to eat more nitrogen than your body needs. And it actually is in a form called ammonia. And ammonia is NH4, and the bacteria in the soil will take that ammonia and break it down and turn it back into nitrate. So the bacteria is decomposing all the waste, and then it gets recycled back into the system again. So that's really cool. So that's called ammonification, when we're breaking down waste into the ammonia, and then it keeps going through the cycle. Okay, so using this nitrogen is all very important. All living things need nitrogen. Your DNA has a lot of nitrogen in it. Okay, now there is some bacteria that will do a step here called denitrification. It's denitrification. So here's some more little bacteria here. And if you look at the arrows, these actually take the nitrates in the soil. And if we follow the arrow up, it is going to turn it back into the nitrogen gas in the atmosphere, completing our cycle. Okay, so denitrification is kind of like the opposite. We're taking the good nitrogen in the soil and it changes back into air. Okay, so why is this cycle important? Why do living things need it? Nitrogen is used to make protein, and protein builds most of your body parts. So your muscles, your bones, your skin are all made of protein. So in order for you to grow big, you need protein for growth and for fixing body parts that are injured. Okay, so that's really important. And then also, you're going to learn more about DNA synthesis later in the quarter, where that's making all the DNA for your cells. Nitrogen's a big part of your DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. See, the N in there is for nitrogen. So two very big reasons why we need nitrogen. So basically, all living things need nitrogen. Okay, so there's kind of a list of those different chemicals there. Excuse me, guys. Okay. Again, you don't have to memorize the names and the symbols and be able to match them up. If you've had chemistry class, you probably are familiar with a lot of those already. If you're taking chemistry in the future, you'll see them again because they're really common chemicals. Okay. Now at the bottom here, there is some info. Why is too much nitrogen a good thing? So if you have too much nitrogen, this little box here says, while plants need nitrogen, too much of it causes excessive growth in algae called an algae bloom. So if there's too much nitrogen, like in a lake, that's going to make the plants in the lake, the little one-celled algae, explode in growth. And you've maybe seen this on a lake around here where in the summertime, the lake gets all green and slimy. Okay, that's called an algae bloom. Nitrogen is in fertilizer. Okay, so all plants need nitrogen. So sometimes farmers will put more fertilizer, or they'll compost manure from cows and stuff, and that will put nitrogen in the soil. But if it runs off into the lake, we end up with this algae bloom. And we're gonna do a picture of that. It's on the back of your sheet. Okay. We got 4 terms here that go with the nitrogen cycle. Ammonification. Okay, so that's making ammonia. That's during decomposition, when things are decomposing. So like manure or cow poop or dead leaves or dead animals that have died, when they get broken back down into soil, the nitrogen in those bodies or in those plants get turned into ammonia. So ammonification is making ammonia from dead things, or from decomposing leaves and manure and stuff. Okay, and then the ammonia can be changed into another chemical by the bacteria that they can use. All right, nitrification is when bacteria converts, and that means changes, the ammonia into nitrates or nitrites. Okay, so like ammonification would happen first, and then nitrification would happen, and then these nitrates or nitrites can be used by the plants. Nitrogen fixation is when the bacteria in the gas, or I'm sorry, the nitrogen in the gas from the air gets changed into something that can be used in the soil. And then denitrification is when the nitrogen in the soil turns back into the nitrogen gas in the air. Okay, so if you need to copy those, go ahead and pause the video. I'm just going to kind of show you that in the picture up here, here's ammonification. We're breaking down the manure. Nitrogen fixation was when we took the nitrogen in the air, changed it to the soil. Denitrification took nitrogen in the soil back to the air. Okay, and so that's kind of all those words. Whoops, sorry there. Let me bring that back down. Okay. So that's kind of our nitrogen cycle picture there. But we want to look at this algae bloom in more detail because we have that happening in Worthington all the time. Okay, so here's a couple versions of this. Oh, here's kind of a different way to say these words here. Again, I'm not going to wait too long, but you can pause the video. So there's ammonification. There's nitrification. So same definitions, maybe just easier to read. Nitrogen fixation, and then denitrification. So pause the video if you need to for those. All right, so here is our picture. Okay, so this is the back of your sheet. It's got some fish on there. And I know the handwriting's not great. I'm going to talk you through what I write in class, and then I'll show you the official answer key, which is a little more complicated, okay? So in the top box, we say humans use nitrogen. One way we can put them into our soil is we grow a plant called a legume, Legumes. And examples of those plants would be soybeans or peas. There's a lot of others. And these plants actually have bacteria in their roots that do the nitrogen fixation. So legume plants, farmers, when they plant soybeans, they're actually putting more nitrogen in the soil. And then maybe next year in that same field, they'll grow corn, which will take a lot of nitrogen out of the soil. So it's called crop rotating, and that's a pretty common practice that farmers have been doing for years. Another thing farmers can do is they can add nitrogen fertilizer to the soil. And a lot of farmers will do that. All right. So what happens if you live by a lake is all that extra nitrogen, usually from fertilizers that are being added, if there's a big rainstorm, it's going to run into the lake. Okay, so here's our lake. It's got some fish. This is a healthy picture here. The fish are happy. There's plants, lots of plants and animals. Food chain is good. Okay. And then we have this thing happen called eutrophication. So big fancy word. What that fancy word means is extra nutrients leach out of the soil and run into the lake. Leach means like drip out. Okay, so the soil's full of extra nitrogen, and then we get a big rainstorm, and the rain carries the nitrogen into the lake. Okay, now a little bit of nitrogen is good. These guys all need a little nitrogen. But too much is going to be a problem. Okay, so too much, we end up with a bunch of, at the top of the lake, we're going to get a bunch of algae growth. Now there's always a little bit of algae, but too much is actually going to create kind of a slimy layer that's going to end up blocking the light. Okay, so in red here it says the algae grow very fast from the extra nutrients. And it's called an algae bloom, the big slimy layer. And the algae bloom blocks the sun and it causes the plants to die. So the regular plants that grow at the bottom of the lake, they're not getting any sunshine because it's being blocked. So these guys die. And of course, they're part of the food chain, so we may end up having some ripple effects from that too. But besides being part of the food chain, these plants are really important because they make oxygen. Okay, all plants release oxygen during photosynthesis, and that oxygen is usually used by these fish. No plants, no oxygen. So if there's no oxygen, these fish are in for a rough time. So that's our bottom picture. And as these plants decompose, the bacteria that are breaking the plants down actually use up more oxygen. So the lake ends up with no oxygen, and the fish and any other animals in the lake die. So that's our dead fish. So we are left with a lake that's green and slimy, dead fish floating in there, and a slimy layer of dead plants at the bottom. So not a fun place to hang out, play, boat, and that kind of thing. Okay. Now, the way this is fixed is if fresh water goes into the lake, that will bring more oxygen, maybe some more seeds. It would help wash or dilute the extra nitrogen out. It might take a winter season for like a lot of snowfall to be washed into the lake to kind of dilute and get that extra nitrogen out. So lots of times the lakes will come back. There will be a few things that don't die. But there has been situations where this was so serious that everything in the lake was dead. And, like the government or the DNR would have to go restock fish and stuff to try to fix it for the future. All right. So that's how humans kind of screw up the nitrogen cycle sometimes. If we have too much nitrogen, we do this damage to our lakes and streams. And of course, anytime you damage that, it's going to mess up the food chain, which damages, everything in the area too. Okay. So that's your basic notes on the nitrogen cycle, guys. If you've got questions, please ask. And you will have some nitrogen cycle things on your chapter test. So it might be a good idea to watch the video again or check out the other links on Schoology. Have a great day.